So we are at the halfway mark. If you've been here for a little while, for September, you know that we're studying the book Presence and Potential by Martha Creek. And in this book, she gives us the tools that she has learned in her life, the tools that she coaches leaders with and communities with. She has given us tools to move past some limits of the human condition that cause suffering and into our divine potential. If you know Martha Creek personally, she is a little bit of a pusher. She pushes us with humor, and she pushes us with authenticity, and she pushes us right into what we want to get into so that we can resolve it and move higher and become a higher level being. Amen? So, last week, I didn't quite cover, she jam-packs this, so we're trying to get everything in. But last week, and don't feel like if you have missed any of these, don't feel like it's going to affect anything, because each Sunday has its own message and its own nugget. She has really encapsulated these in a way that you can get everything you need to without having experienced the whole book yet. I would encourage you to go back and visit the old YouTubes and catch up and see what's there, because it's so good, it's so golden, and the chapters of the book, really there's not one that I would say would be good to miss, so you're probably going to want to do that. But last week, we didn't cover chapters 9 and 10, which are so fun. This whole day is going to be fun. Are you ready for fun today? Refuse to coerce, will, and threaten others into going along with you. And refuse to be coerced, willed, and threatened. Sound good? And then this week, keeping relationships open, change my position from victimization to what I can do. Can you say amen to that? That's like the unity bumper sticker, right? If you see someone in unity that's walking the talk, you know them by how they show up. They have not allowed the negative things in their life to destroy them to the piece of becoming what has affected them. Instead, they have used what has happened as part of their becoming. And then she says, gain space and time and a broader perspective about anything. Now, one of the things when we have our fall series, it's called Adventures in Spirituality, and we have it every year, but one of the kind of keynotes of it is becoming vulnerable. Why? Vulnerability creates intimacy, it creates self-reflection, it creates growth, right? It creates community. So it's pretty important. Raise your hand if you've been either in a small group or you've taken this to a friend, a family member, a counselor, anyone, and you've had moments of vulnerability so far. Gosh, that's awesome. Today I think it's my turn. I believe it or not, because there are little stories that come in here. I loathe talking about myself and my own stuff. It's not fun. It's not something I want to do. It's not the type of talks that I like to listen to. But as I was processing these chapters today and this week, as I was processing, there is a story of my life that put together just about everything in these weeks. Just about everything. And you know what it was? My marriage. I had one. Did you know that? It was really short. In fact, I kind of consider it, he might be watching, because I did ask for permission. So hey there. But it was so short that I was like, that wasn't really even a real one, was it? I've still never been married, have I? No. No, that's just a joke. Cancel for him, because that would hurt his feelings. So it's really not just about that, because my marriage was something that happened in the context of, those of you that were here, in the context of what? Community. Right? So like in the beginning of coming here, I came with a relationship, and I also got out of one. And I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my fears. I learned a lot about my boundaries and my limits through this experience. But I want to start with the tale of two Carries. Part of today is not gossiping. Are you ready for the tale of two Carries? I share this. out of not gossip, but I share this out of context. So there's a tale of two Carries, and I'm pretty sure I don't know any Carrie very well. So that is a different name. Got it? So in the tale of two Carries, I was going through trouble in my marriage. And actually, in reflection, there was a lot from the beginning that, we really shouldn't have been on that track in the first place, because there was the energy of what Martha Creek talks about, how not to will, how not to coerce, how not to try to encourage someone, right, to have your same idea, right? So sometimes people meet people and they think, this sounds like a good idea, right? But if you notice the subtleties in relationship, there can be a little bit too much, I need you to be a little different than you are. So I was with someone who is just a gorgeous creation of light and just absolutely loves to, play around, not play around. No, just kidding. But just have just so much fun, right? And just be out there with the world having fun, right? And I wanted someone to be home with me. I wanted not just to be home like I want to control you, but I wanted to this is a family now. We're going to do this for us. And they're like, I got to go make my own friends. And I was like, wait, I didn't think that was what marriage was about. I mean, I get it. I got a lot of my own friends, but I thought it was going to be us from now on. So there was this constant push and pull, right, of styles. And we both loved music, but our love for music was incredibly different. He loved all music, and he wanted to be in the front of music, right? Do you remember that, John Fry? To know him is to love him. But our styles were different. I wanted to actually finish a song, from beginning to end. So as we started getting clearer and clearer on what our needs were, it was clear that our needs were incompatible. But I and he were both just trying to push because there was so much love there and there was so much it made sense and it was just love, love, love. So why? Until there was a final realization that I was not behaving in the way that I would like to behave because I was crossing my own boundaries. I was crossing my own boundaries. And I could no longer hold someone else accountable for being who they are not, right? And in order to love them in the way they deserve and need to be loved, I needed to let them go and bring them back into friendship rather than relationship, and certainly marriage. I'm getting rid of all the jokes. Just let them go. So in the tale of two Carries, I was in the midst of this, in the midst of church. And raise your hand if you've had a separation or a divorce. Yeah, okay. So I was doing this in the midst of ministry and a lot of love and support for both of us in the community. And I started to hear stories about myself. And the one thing I loathe more than talking about myself is other people talking about me. Anyone else in that camp, right? Unless it's for healing, helping, whatever. Then I'm use all my stories, use the blood and the guts, that's fine. But if it's just about entertainment or judgment, it hurts, doesn't it? And then think of being in a spiritual community with it, right? In a spiritual community, it hurts more. And then think of me, over 10 years ago, right? So there weren't a lot of stories because we have a very high consciousness community here. But with the tale of two Carries, there was a point where some stories were being shared before I was willing to share the story. So we had made an agreement to get a divorce. And if you're Erin McCabe, the way you do this is you file for the divorce. And then you say, we still have 3 months that you could really go to counseling and you could figure this out. If you really want this, and you're not going to leave the house or anything yet. And then even after the divorce is final, you still don't tell anybody that it's final and you're officially divorced. And you still stay in the same house and maybe you could still work on it until you start seeing other stuff that it's actually, this is going to kill both of us. So he started sharing stuff, but not too much, but no one really knew that we were getting a divorce or that we had actually gotten a divorce. Talk about private and whatever that is. Fears, really, a lot of it is fears. And just discomfort, you want to move through something on your own, and then you want to be able to share it in your own time, right? So I knew there was a little bit of chitter-chatter, and there was one particular person that was a lot of chitter-chatter, and a lot of chitter-chatter with a lot of people, and I knew, but there's really nothing you can do about that, right? You can't manage people, can you? We might have the illusion or delusion that we can manage a partner, but to think you could manage the people of life, forget it, right? So I wasn't intent on doing that, but I kind of knew something was probably going on, and I was just praying about it. And then finally, a beloved came up to me, and who is great friends with Carrie, and said, I just want you to know, Carrie is telling people that you and your husband are getting a divorce. And I was like, so I literally hadn't talked to anyone except for my very close people about this. But I just took a breath and I said, well, thank you for confirming what I thought. And I still did nothing about it. But it was good because that person just let me know, so I knew what was on the radar, right? And I had a lot of respect for that. So what did I do? I had a direct conversation and led to nothing, right? Led to... And so I was just where I was before anything happened, right? Okay, that's how someone shows up, and that is what it is. And then there was another Carrie. And I took at that time, I used to go to Florida every year for one of the weekends for a spiritual renewal time. And I stayed with girlfriends that are very healing for me, that one is a practitioner. And so I was there, and I can remember the moment distinctly. I was sitting there relaxing, taking time for me in the bathtub, and all of a sudden a text came up. And the text said, "You're getting a divorce?" Or maybe it said, "You got a divorce?" And this is a different Carrie. And I just remember looking at it and then putting the phone down and then just crying, just blubbering, just going how am I going to do this? How am I going to get through this, right? And I don't know if I asked, how did you find out or what, I don't remember. But it turned out they were snooping around on CaseNet. Anyone know CaseNet? If you're dating, you need to. That's not a joke. So she was on CaseNet for a variety of things having to do with something that she needed to find information out. I mean, I say that, but I don't know how my name came up, but whatever. It was there. And this is a person that I cared about and whatever. And so the next little bit of the conversation we had, I said, I'm still processing. I'm not ready to tell people and to talk about it yet. And it's really, really hard, I waited a really long time to get married, a really long time. So it was hard. And she just said back, "You're safe with me. This is how I found out. I would hold you in prayer and confidence until you're ready to tell people, but I want you to know you're not alone, and I want you to know you're safe, and I want you to know I love you, and I care, and you're going to get through this, and the community's going to get through this." Can you feel the difference? It was the same horror of a moment, but then the difference. And I remember sitting down and talking to my board president at the time, who was Drayton Riley, and I remember kind of getting tears in my eyes and letting him know, what was going on. And, almost with I'm not sure if I can do this, if I should do this, and he just looked at me, and I don't even know the words, but in his own way, he just looked at me and said, "You need to do what you need to do for you. Let everything else fall where it may. You need to take care of you." And then he said, "Do you want to know one thing that a lot of people in the community have in common?" And I said, "No, what?" "How many of them do you think have been divorced?" And I was like, oh. So we're all allowed to have what looks like an imperfect life, right? And there's permission for that. In that one statement, he gave me permission. Now, that one statement, right, it wasn't gossiping, it wasn't telling stories, it wasn't sharing something that shouldn't be shared. It's sharing information and sharing stories to alleviate suffering, yeah? To bring people together. Martha, in her book this week, talks about how destructive gossip can be. So, in this tale of two Carries, one dug and discovered and then spread. Another saw and called and bonded, right? Now, I wrestled for a while of wanting to share my firsthand experience from a rooftop, like, nobody tell this person anything. And it's been what, like 10 years now before I've even used it in a talk, right? And I use it in a talk out of respect. I don't know anything about this person's life or their intentions or what happened around it, right? But I share this story because we've all shared stories, haven't we? I mean, really, if you look at it, have you ever shared a story that maybe you thought after wasn't yours to tell? We don't know what the ricochet of that is. We don't know what someone goes through. We don't know the dark night of their soul. We don't know what that might put them at risk for. Do we want to be a part of that creation, or do we want to be a part of up-leveling, uplifting, of healing, of renewing someone's faith in community and God? I learned a good lesson. I learned that people need to learn those things on your own, right? We all need to learn those things on our own. And we can't manage people. It's futile. We can't really even clarify, but we can remember the words of George Harrison, who said, gossip is the devil's radio, don't be his DJ. Right? Now, the next time someone comes up to you and tries to gossip, what about tossing that one out? Well, you know, gossip is the devil's radio. Don't be his DJ. Engaging in gossip serves harmful purposes rather than promoting growth, kindness, wellness, compassion. What happens and how do we show up? Because it's awkward and it's uncomfortable, isn't it, when someone shares a story with us that maybe is not ours to hear. I had a friend recently telling me about someone that was really none of my business what they had going on, and was going into the depths of the story. And I said, just hold for a second. If there's something you need me to know so that I can help you process, or you heal, or you with your intention, then I'm all ears. But if this is just about them and their story, I have no desire to hear it. That can be hard to do, right? Because you can worry you're going to hurt someone's feelings. But what you can also do, is help someone know how to be in relationship with you, help someone know what you're about, right? There's a difference between gossip and sharing stories for your healing, right? Because we all have stories that, and many of us are external processors, right? Anyone else out there an external processor? Yeah. It's like to sit with your story in your mind is different than getting someone else's perspective, right? But there is a way to share a story that goes like, I'm not laughing about the person, I'm not making fun of, I'm not mocking, I'm not shaming, I'm not blaming. I'm looking at my stuff through the lens of my world, and this has to do with me, and I'm giving context, right? I'm giving context. And that's very different. I had a rude awakening. I really don't. Vulnerability. It's okay. If she sees this, it'll offer a great talk. I had a vulnerability with my mother. Hi, Mom. She was staying at my house because she came to help me through a really, really difficult time. And one of the nights she was going to bed, now she's hard of hearing, so she talks very loud. So she was on the phone when she said she was going to be going to bed, and I heard all this loud talking. And it's right by the hallway when I'm walking by. So I come by and thinking, what's going on? And so I get to the door, and I can hear my brother-in-law's voice. And then I can hear the context of the conversation. And it includes stuff about me and how I'm not making wise choices and what's going on with me and some of the ignorant or people that are manipulative or whatever it is that have been in my life. And they're cackling and they're making jokes. Now, if you knew me in childhood, you'd be shocked. Like, my mother has been one of my best friends. And I clear her energy because we all have things that we do that are high-level consciousness and that are low-level consciousness. But I stood there, and this brother-in-law I've had some interesting times with, some rough times with. And I stood there at the door like, and my little Irish banshee wanted to just bust open that door and be like, "Cut, you dirty scoundrels, out of my house," right? Enough already. But I stood there, I took a deep breath, and I said to myself, nothing new is happening in this moment. I'm just more aware of it now. So now I can be more mindful about what I share and what I don't share. Now I can make different choices. And I stood there, and even the next morning, I did do a little sneaky checks. I did my own little McCabe, little Irish, like, you wouldn't talk to anybody about what's going on with me in this situation, would you? No. And not your sister, not your aunt, not my brothers-in-law, and everyone would know not to like gossip about that and talk about it, right? Oh yeah. And again, just now I know more that I didn't know before, but nothing has changed. I'm just more informed. I just know a little bit more about where my heart is safe and where I need to be more mindful, but brutal. And I chose not to say anything. And in Martha's book, she talks about, going to the person firsthand, right? Rather than giving a sermon about it and wondering if they might see, but they're not gonna see because they're Catholic now. And so they don't watch the sermons like they used to. And I doubt the brother-in-law is watching either, so I don't think he's gonna go. And we don't generally tend to go viral, so I think we're pretty safe. And if we're not, I'm willing to take accountability for that. And I'm willing to allow that to generate a meaningful, conscious conversation. But Martha encourages us to go directly to the source, right? Because how silly it is that sometimes we have these things happen and then we don't go talk to the person that it's about, right? Or the person that said something. But then she gives a little caveat. There are some times that you don't do that. There's some times where you might recognize, it's not going to help much. So you just bless and release. And that, friends, is how to shift the dynamics of a relationship so you can actually honor and love someone. If I was to continue to keep going into that relationship in that way with vulnerability, then I would also need to keep crucifying her or crucifying him or crucifying them or that. Can you fill in the blank in your own life? I either have to keep holding you accountable for what I want you to be able to know how to do naturally, right? So I either have to coerce, manipulate, judge, blame you, or I get to have realistic expectations about how we show up for each other. And then I can love you and accept you as you are, and also incorporate healthier boundaries for myself. Amen? So when listening to someone when they're sharing, how can we break these addictions that we have in our culture? We can, one, listen to the tune of this is how they operate, right? So when someone's sharing with us maybe what is not meant to be shared, we could be listening to see, this is how they operate. We can also think, this also applies to me. Get it? This also applies to me. There's a Spanish proverb, whoever gossips to you will gossip about you. Right? Be realistic with ourselves. Whoever gossips to you will gossip about you. Another thing that I love to encourage people to do, and I do myself, like I give people just like I did here today, like this isn't about blaming anyone. This isn't about going, oh, right? This is about learning. I'm processing this so I can learn about me, so I can heal me, so I can have a healthier boundary. So put that in our conversations, right? If you're sharing about something that has to do with you, I mean, obviously if it's just blanket gossip, maybe just take a check, right? Give yourself permission to step out of it. Give yourself permission to stop someone. But if there is a story that has to do with other people and you're sharing it in your own process, explain to someone why you're sharing it. I'm sharing this so you have context. I'm sharing this so you know where I'm coming from. I'm sharing this so you know what I've been through, right? But we can be uninterested unless we're getting support. I learned one of the greatest lessons from one of our congregants who, when someone had shared some things, and I saw this person actually do this multiple times, and I don't actually know how it came about, but I remember she said to me, after we were debriefing something, she said to me, someone shared that with me, and she said, but I didn't make the space to listen to it. And I said, well, teach me about that. What did you do? And she said something like, but it was even more powerful, but she said something like, I'm going to act like you never said that because that's not yours to share. And I don't want it in my ears. And I was like, boy, did I feel honored. And it was like a little Texas two-step from shame, but like kind of cute shame, you know, like I'm just gonna act like I didn't hear that to honor the situation. And I thought, there's an unknown saying, gossip dies when it hits a wise person's ears. Gossip dies when it hits a wise person's ears. If we are unity practitioners, or if we are people of new thought, people of God, then our duty, our job, our divine birthright is to create healing, create love, compassion, acceptance, transformation, beauty in each moment. Yeah? So when it comes to these conversations, we think about that. We think, what is mine to do? What is mine to create here? I was watching a cute new show, and it has a rabbi in it, and they were having a dinner party, and at the dinner party, they were asking a question, and the rabbi said that he was asked to give a response, a rabbinical response to what was going on, and it had to do about telling stories or sharing that, something's going on. And he said this, he said, Rabbi Ishmael in the Talmud said, someone who engages in gossip is equal in sin to someone who commits murder. Someone who engages in gossip is equal in sin to someone who creates murder. What does it do, gossip? What does it do? It teaches people about your character. Yeah, right? It teaches people about your character. And it trains people on how to relate to you, right? It trains people that know about it. It trains them to be private or to be quiet. It trains them in what is safe. It trains them actually in your consciousness. What also does it do? It discredits us when we do it, right? And it's also incredibly destructive, right? Share another story. It would be vulnerable only through my family line, but there's a story about a woman, Annie Delaney, in my family line. And I don't know if I have the story exactly correctly. I'd have to ask my mom to watch the sermon to see if this, I'm ready for the conversation. If this is really true or exactly how it went. But the story is that Annie Delaney at one point, and I'm checking the sanctuary for littles. At one point, Annie Delaney lifted off into her freedom form on purpose with an oven in her apartment. And the story goes, in my family, we have a few liftoffs in my family. And the story goes that she was a gossip and hung out with some gossips, and that at some point there was a gossiping story about a priest. Now, I don't know if the story was true or not true, or who found out or whatever, blah, 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 right? But somehow the shame was so much, or what's that word I'm looking for? Regret. The regret was so much that it was too much on Annie Delaney. And she lifted off because of it. That means don't share stories about your minister. No. I'm just trying to see if I could second with a comedy act, but no, bless you, Annie Delaney. We're healing. Ho'oponopono. Nothing is worth keeping secrets. Nothing is worth not sharing, right? We are here to be vulnerable. We're here to share our stories. So how can we share our stories consciously and responsibly, right? How can we do it in a way that doesn't keep secrets? Because the other side of that is we feel muffled, we feel muzzled, and we feel like we can't talk and share because we're taught that, oh, you can't talk about anyone or anything. No, it's not that. Can you speak with the highest of intentions? Can you speak with reverence? Can, even when you go through the muck and the dirt of it, can you be willing to share and know that you're not betraying someone because you're sharing what's going on in your home or in your life or in your experience? But we tend to step away from that, and some people have an addiction to gossip. And what that does when you have an addiction to gossip is it keeps you isolated from everyone else. You know why? Because people can't be authentic with us. People can't share with us. People can't be safe with us. And then you know what we get? We get a cookie cutter version of friendships. We get a cookie cutter version of relationships that is void of the Spirit. We get something that's false. So it's important to be vulnerable. It's important to share. It's important to be real. It's important sometimes to share those things that even you don't want to say out loud because you'd rather maybe stick your head in an oven than share it. It's healing. Can we share these things in a sacred way that generates love, generates wisdom, generates compassion? Know the difference between processing and gossip. Contemplate the idea of why they say gossip might be akin to murder. It even relates to sharing someone's good news. We lose credibility. It's destructive when we talk about business that's not our own, unless we are processing our feelings. And what it often does is it gets us to a place where we avoid intimacy. Because you know what? When we're talking about them, who are we not talking about? Us. When we're talking about their marriage, whose marriage are we not talking about? Ours. When we're talking about their mistakes and their shortcomings, whose might we be avoiding being real about? Our own. And sharing is healing. Gossip is gruesome, but sharing is healing. Martha Creek says to come back home to ourselves and to ask ourselves, what am I doing? How am I in relationship to this? How am I responsible? What can we do besides talk about somebody else? And some tips for breaking addiction, because we've got to be real with ourselves. For some people, it's addiction. It's just addiction. It's not even intending to be harmful. For some people, it's a way of bonding, right? Like talking about the weather because you don't know what else to say. For some people, it's so uncomfortable to go within, to go to me. They're not meaning to gossip or share stories. They don't even really realize the ricochet, right? But it can be addictive. And it can be a way of trying to get comfortable or trying to be funny or trying to be loved or get attention, trying to be in the know. It could be an ego thing. I have to know this before everyone else. I have to know all about everyone else because I don't feel important enough in my life. Once you get deep enough into the practices, your heart of compassion just opens to everyone and things become less personal, yeah? They become less personal. Because we're all on the journey of healing. To break the addiction, here are some simple tools. Visualize the person there with you and continue with the conversation. Right? Seriously, not kidding. Just picture them in the room with you. If that doesn't work, visualize a microphone and visualize everyone you know is in earshot. God is in earshot. Just like if you're telling a story on a lake, all your neighbors can hear you. It comes right off the water into their homes. The next is to flip it, to just ask yourself, is it necessary? What's my motive for sharing? And let that tool help it bring you back to you so that you really get why you started to share, because sometimes we get confused about that. Am I sharing for context? Am I sharing for understanding, for support, for entertainment, for shaming, for slandering, for manipulating opinion, for building a case, for healing? Words are free. It's how you use them that may cost a lot, that may cost everything. Eleanor Roosevelt said, great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, small minds discuss people. And there's an unknown saying, do not be pulled into a drama, even if you're invited. Instead, be a light. Namaste.